Imagine being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and being so terrified of your own backbenchers that you're prepared to abandon major policy reforms before they even see the light of day. Well, that's exactly where Sir Keir Starmer finds himself right now. Downing Street is in panic mode, desperately trying to prevent another humiliating revolt over proposed special educational needs reforms, and insiders are calling the whole situation a bloody mess. Welcome to Labour's government, where the U-turns come faster than you can count them, and backbenchers wield more power than the cabinet. This is going to be good. Quick favor, if you're loving this, hit that subscribe button. Over 94% of viewers haven't yet. It's free, takes a second, and means the world to us. Cheers if you did. Now, back to the show. So let's set the scene properly, because the context here is absolutely crucial. Sir Keir Starmer is scrambling, and I mean genuinely scrambling, to prevent another backbench revolt as Downing Street weighs up options to scale back proposed special educational needs reforms. Insiders are fearing yet another humiliating comedown for the Prime Minister, and they're not mincing words about it either. They're calling this situation a bloody mess, which is the kind of language you don't usually hear from government sources unless things are genuinely going sideways. This drama unfolds on the very same day that Andrew Gwynn announced he's standing down as an MP, paving the way for Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham to potentially run in a by-election in his Gorton and Denton constituency. So whilst Starmer's dealing with potential rebellion over education policy, he's also got to manage the political theatre of a high-profile by-election, where Andy Burnham, who's never been shy about his leadership ambitions, could be returning to Westminster. The timing could not be more awkward if it tried. Now, what exactly are these reforms that have got everyone so worked up? Well, Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, is reportedly examining plans to restrict education, health and care plans, known as EHCPs, to only the most severe and complex cases. On the surface, that might sound reasonable. The system is overwhelmed, costs are spiraling, surely we need to focus resources where they're needed most, right? But here's the problem. Parents of children with special educational needs are absolutely fierce advocates for their kids, and any suggestion that support might be withdrawn or restricted sets off alarm bells immediately. Officials at Number 10 are said to be anxious, and that's putting it mildly, about proceeding with such changes. Backbenchers are marshalling to resist, which is parliamentary speak for getting ready to absolutely kick off if this goes ahead. With a white paper expected within weeks, those inside the decision process have issued a damning verdict on the current state of considerations. One insider told The Times that it's still a bloody mess just a couple of weeks before the white paper is due. If they go ahead with the proposed changes, they could have a fight like the one over the welfare bill and pensioners. It's going to be extremely challenging. Let's pause for a moment to appreciate what's being said here. A government insider is publicly, albeit anonymously, admitting that their own policy rollout is a bloody mess. They're comparing it to previous revolts over welfare and pensioners, both of which forced humiliating U-turns from the government. And they're saying this just weeks before the policy is supposed to be formally presented. That's not a minor hiccup in the legislative process, that's a full-blown crisis of confidence. Downing Street is understood to be gravitating towards making only superficial adjustments to the current framework rather than pursuing fundamental change. In other words, they're bottling it. They're preparing to back down before they've even properly started. Why? Because, as the source delightfully explained, the politics are too hard. There would need to be legislation to change the system, and that could lead to them losing another vote or yet another U-turn. So rather than risk defeat or embarrassment, they're just going to tinker around the edges and hope nobody notices they've abandoned their actual reform agenda. It's worth understanding why this issue is so politically toxic, and for that we need to look at the state of the special educational needs system. Bridget Phillipson previously described inheriting a SEND system that was on its knees and failing schools, families and local authorities alike. She's not wrong. The system is genuinely broken. Expenditure on high needs provision climbed from £7.5 billion in 2016 to at least £12 billion this year. That's a 60% increase in less than a decade. And it's not stopping there. Projections suggest spending will surpass £21 billion by 2029. The Institute for Fiscal Services reported that SEND spending was expected to more than double in real terms between 2015 and 2028. Where's that money coming from? Well, here's the unpalatable truth. These increases are largely being funded by reducing allocations to mainstream schools. So you've got a situation where mainstream education is being squeezed to pay for special educational needs provision, which creates resentment and tension. But you can't just cut SEND provision without looking absolutely heartless. It's a genuine policy nightmare with no easy answers. However, and this is where it gets politically explosive, Helen Hayes, the Education Select Committee chair, has warned against restricting access to support plans. She said that any erosion of current rights and entitlements will simply undermine confidence further, and that the government should therefore not go this route. When your own Education Select Committee chair is publicly warning you not to proceed with your policy, you know you're in trouble. This isn't the opposition attacking you. This is friendly fire from your own benches. Schools Minister Georgia Gould, who holds responsibility for SEND policy, postponed an earlier version of the white paper that had been scheduled for release last autumn. According to sources, Gould, who has earned the confidence of parents and SEND campaigners, halted the document because the preparatory work was inadequate. Translation, it was a complete shambles and would have sparked outrage if published as originally drafted. So she hit the brakes, went back to the drawing board and started actually consulting with the people affected. They're more like gladiatorial combat with statistics and GDP projections as weapons. What makes this situation particularly tricky for Starmer is that he's trying to perform a delicate balancing act. On one hand, he needs to reassure Leave voters, particularly in those red wall seats Labour recaptured, that he's not trying to reverse Brexit by stealth. On the other hand, the economic reality is that Brexit has created trade barriers and economic friction that many businesses find frustrating and costly. So Labour's position seems to be, we're definitely not rejoining the customs union, except we might want to have a gentle debate about it, but anyone who suggests we should is being foolish, unless they're making the point that it would be crazy not to consider it. Clear as mud, right? Kyle's comments about Turkey are particularly interesting. He noted that it took Turkey 20 years to join the customs union with the EU. That timeline is accurate, but it's also slightly misleading. Turkey's journey was complicated by numerous political factors, membership negotiations, and specific arrangements about their relationship with the EU. Britain, having recently been a full EU member with all the institutional knowledge and existing trade infrastructure, wouldn't necessarily follow the same timeline. But Kyle's point seems to be that rejoining wouldn't be quick or simple, which is probably the one thing everyone can agree on. What's fascinating about this whole debacle is how it reveals the internal tensions within Labour about Brexit. During the opposition years, Starmer has been able to maintain discipline on this issue because, frankly, nobody really cared what the opposition thought about Brexit. But now they're in government, with ministers attending international forums and making trade policy, those private disagreements are becoming public contradictions. Some Labour MPs and ministers clearly believe that closer alignment with the EU, potentially including a customs union, is economically necessary. Others believe that reopening Brexit debates would be political suicide. And Starmer is stuck in the middle, trying to keep everyone happy while maintaining those red lines he drew during the election campaign. The timing of this chaos is also rather unfortunate for Labour. They're trying to convince the country that they have a coherent plan for economic growth, that they're the stable, competent alternative to years of Conservative chaos. But when your ministers are publicly contradicting each other and themselves on fundamental economic policy, that stability narrative takes rather a battering.
It's hard to convince businesses to invest and plan for the long term when the government can't seem to decide whether it's open to a customs union or considers the idea foolish utopian thinking. Kyle's insistence that he's focusing on what it takes to get growth into the economy now is telling. He's trying to pivot away from the long-term customs union question to immediate growth measures. But that doesn't really work when you've just been asked directly about the customs union and said it would be crazy not to consider it. You can't simultaneously argue that something is worth considering and that you're not going to consider it because you're focused on other things. Well, you can, but people might reasonably point out that you're talking nonsense. There's also Kyle's claim that the Brexit debate ripped our country apart, but now we are back together as a country. This is the kind of optimistic political rhetoric that sounds lovely, but doesn't survive contact with reality. Brexit didn't just create a temporary disagreement that we've all since resolved with a nice cup of tea and a biscuit. It revealed and deepened fundamental divisions about Britain's place in the world, about immigration, sovereignty, economic priorities, and national identity. Those divisions haven't magically healed because Labour won an election.